Hello people, my name is Kayode Ewumi and welcome to the story of the week. Today's story is titled, Oh Margaret. I hope you enjoy this one. During the Second World War, many young Germans were forced to join the army to fight for their country. Obviously, as you watch this video, please bear in mind that we didn't have the budget, to kind of recreate a World War II film, to just kind of settle with what we have, yeah? All right, great. There was a young lady called Margaret who had just gotten married to a handsome young soldier. Now, unfortunately, after their marriage, the soldier had to leave for the battlefield. In great sadness, he wept over his new bride, Margaret, and kissed her 100 times. He said, "Bye, dumpling." And she said, "Baby, don't go." Then he was like, "Oh, I gotta go. Then she was like, "Baby, don't go." Then he was like, "No, genuinely, I have to go. I'm gonna miss my train." And yeah, and then they both said bye. He then became a Russian prisoner of war and was sent to work in the camps. In the prison, he prayed constantly that he would be released so that he could go back to his beautiful wife, Margaret. Being a prisoner of war was a terrible experience. Every day when he got up, he would think of Margaret. In every step he made during the day, carrying rocks and boulders from place to place, in the cold and in the heat, he thought of only one thing, Margaret. So let's fast forward a few years later, and the Germans have lost the war. Yeah. The prisoners were excited because they hoped to be released alive. One day, the commander of the prison camp came up with a list of prisoners who were to be released. The list was read out, name by name by name. And of course, the soldier's name was on the list. He could only think of one thing, Margaret. I'm gonna see Margaret. So he packed his belongings and took a train to Germany. When he finally arrived in his town, he was shocked to find that almost every building had been bombed, and the town he once knew was now basically a pile of rubble. He walked down the street and came to the road where he had lived with Margaret. To his amazement, their house was one of the few still standing. His heart began to pound as he walked up to the door. The moment of truth had come. He knocked the door, wondering if anybody lived in that house. Suddenly he heard footsteps, which he recognized. These are the footsteps of Margaret, he thought to himself. Suddenly, the door opened and there she was, more beautiful than the noonday sun, even more splendid than she had looked on her wedding day. He lifted his hands up and screamed, "Margaret, I'm back." Oh. Margaret slammed the door and she locked it. He started banging and knocking the door, screaming, Margaret, it's me, your husband. Margaret, open the door, I'm your husband." But she did not open the door. This young man, who had looked forward to seeing his beautiful bride, was now in a state of shock. He stood outside the door knocking and calling for Margaret, but she simply did not answer the door. Do you want to know why? Do you want to know why Margaret did not open the door? I'll tell you why. It's the same reason why the church is not opening the door of its heart to Jesus. There was somebody else in the house. That's why Margaret did not open the door. Another man had come to live in the house whilst Margaret's husband was away at war. You see, the love of the world has filled the heart of the church, and Jesus is outside knocking and asking to be let in. This story was deep, man. That one was an excerpt from the book How You Can Preach Salvation by the author Dag Heward-Mills. If you'd like to read more from this book, please check the description box below. And don't forget to subscribe. Bye.